The former Revival, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, appeared on Talk Is Jericho to speak for the first time since getting their release from WWE. Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. I can't say that I'm a fan of that Dax Harwood name, but Cash Wheeler is cool. I said before, he sounds like he'd make for a mean pit boss at a Vegas casino. So a few notes. This was one of the least controversial of all these kind of what I'd call exit interviews that people have given to Chris Jericho or on some other wrestler podcast. They really weren't out to bash or bury Vince McMahon or WWE. They just felt like they were being honest. They were telling their side of the story, confirming certain stories that have been floating around on the internet for a while, and explaining why they wanted out of that company so badly. The one thing that comes across more than anything else in this interview is the passion that these two guys clearly have for tag team wrestling. It's not a gimmick. You know, you can call them marks or whatever. I mean, they have a passion for tag team wrestling. They want to be part of a strong tag team division somewhere, wherever that may be. And they just did not have the assurances that they were looking for from WWE that, you know, that they were going to be able to be part of a healthy, robust tag team division. And they just felt we've got to get out of here. You know, we're not growing. We're not happy. So I have a lot of respect for them. That at the end of the day, it wasn't about the money. It was about doing what they felt would make them happy and make them the most fulfilled. That could be a lesson that everybody, I think, could take away from the Revival story, if nothing else. So we learned that the name Dash Wilder came from Dusty Rhodes, who at the time was working with the talent down in developmental over at NXT. Came from Dusty because of dashing Cody Rhodes when he was portraying that gimmick a number of years ago, hence Dash Wilder. They first asked for their release in January of 2019, so last January, after a win on Raw over the Lucha House Party. They intentionally wanted to wait until they were on an upswing. They were actually winning matches and weren't being buried in losing matches every week. They felt, probably correctly, that if they were on some kind of losing streak on TV and they went to management and they asked to be released and they were raising a stink, that it would just look like the only reason they were looking to leave is because they were losing. And they intentionally wanted to wait until they started winning matches and then go ahead and ask for their release. They said the company had even promised them that they were going to put the tag team titles on them. But they weren't happy. And they felt correctly that the titles meant nothing. They meant nothing. So them promising them the tag team champion, I mean, it's like me finding a piece of lint on the floor. Oh, hey, here you go. This is a pretty piece of lint. I bet it is, but it means nothing to me. What am I supposed to do with it? So that's how they felt about the tag team titles. But they said, you know, at the time, Braun Strowman had steamrolled the entire tag team division, and they liked Braun. Braun's, you know, a cool guy, whatever. But he had steamrolled the entire tag team division single-handedly. Made them all look like a bunch of goofs. Then he went and won the tag team championships at WrestleMania with a 9-year-old. They mentioned that no tag teams were featured at all last year on the SummerSlam card, except for a women's tag team title match that only got added at the very last minute. And that really told them all they needed to know about what the company thought about tag team wrestling and what the company thought about the tag team divisions in the company at that time, which is to say, you know, outside of pushing New Day, which I'm sure sells a lot of merch, they didn't think very highly of their tag team division. And if they did have a weak tag team division, then they felt obviously the company wasn't doing things to address that and to strengthen it and bolster it and bring in new teams. So they felt they had to leave. Now, they said that they think the company felt at first when they came to them and said, hey, we want our release, they think the company thought they were bluffing. The company was very surprised because they were going to put the tag team titles on them. And they said, it's not about that. It's not about the tag team titles. We don't care about that. We want the entire division to be healthy and to do well. And Wilder was very clear that they thought the tag team championships meant absolutely nothing. They would be happy to lose to the champions on television and job out on TV every single week if it meant that the company would begin to take the division seriously. And they told Vince McMahon they're happy to stay. They don't want to leave. They're happy to stay if they could be given assurances that they were serious about putting more of a focus on the tag team division. Otherwise, they were going to have to leave. Then they talked about the final meeting that they had with Vince McMahon. I love all these Vince McMahon stories. We've been hearing a lot of Vince McMahon stories lately, which is weird. It's crazy to think about. He's 74 years old. I think he'll be 75 later this summer. And he is as involved in every aspect of this company as he has ever been. Like, I would kind of understand him being involved in every aspect, business aspect, the investor calls, what's going on with this division and that division, negotiating television contracts and things of that nature. But the fact that he's doing all of that and tried to run a football league and is still in the day-to-day sitting there with a headset on, every aspect of creative on every television show, or at least the ones, on Mondays and Fridays, it's mind-boggling that he is still involved so deeply at that level of every little thing and micromanaging every little thing when it comes to these shows. Wilder said that it was tough to meet with Vince because at the time, they were getting ready, they were transitioning over to Fox, for the SmackDown show. He had XFL preparations. But one day they were working on putting together a match. They were in the ring together and they were called. I guess maybe they got a text message from Mark Carano of Talent Relations telling them to come to Vince's office ASAP. Come to Vince's office. He wants to meet with you. So they go in there, and this ties into those ridiculous costume designs that were leaked on social media several weeks ago. He said that the designs that were leaked were 100% real. And they were presented to them by Vince McMahon. This was the urgent thing Vince McMahon needed to meet with them about, to show them this concept art, to show them these designs. and Dawson, he said that a lot of times in the company, the boys are kayfabed about everything. They don't know anything. People don't tell them things, or they tell them, false things because maybe they don't want things to spread or leak or whatever. He said the boys are kayfabed more than anybody. And he is positive that whoever leaked those images was a member of the creative team. Because if things are being leaked, he says more often than not, good rule of thumb to live by, it's someone from the office who's leaking the information. It's not coming from the locker room. So Wilder, he's looking at these images, and he said he couldn't even tell the story here on the podcast without laughing. He said no self-respecting person would wear the outfits that this company wanted them to wear. And he said, he's like, look, hand on the Bible, I laughed out loud upon seeing the designs right there in front of everybody at that meeting. I don't know if Bruce Pritchard was in the meeting or who else would have been there with Vince McMahon, but Vince McMahon was in the room. He was there at the table, and he says he busted out laughing when he saw the designs. I think he said Pritchard was there, actually. And you look at these costumes, I'm not even sure how to describe them. They've got, suspenders and tassels, and I think Wilder was wearing lipstick like a clown. In the design, they had like these weird glow sticks. Dawson was wearing a do-rag, like he was Vince McMahon, his ECW champion or something. McMahonism. He's wearing a do-rag. This is what it would look like if you looked at these images. I was looking at them and I thought to myself, what does this remind me of? And the first thought that came to my head, I'm looking at these images and how goofy these two guys look. And I thought to myself, this is what it would look like if Doink fucked one of the Ninja Turtles. That's what these two would have looked like. So it was explained to them that this would be a different way to showcase them and for them to show more personality, to show their charisma. And Wilder said, he just turned to them and said, these are not good. These are bad. These are very, very bad. But he said, we'll do them. If you want us to do them, we'll do the characters until our contracts expire. And he said this was on a Friday. And by the following Wednesday, they were told that they were being taken off the road going forward and they were not going to be working at all. And in fact, not only were they not working, I guess maybe they met the downside guarantee on their contracts. Once that was met, and with them being taken off the road, the last few months, they weren't even being paid. But he said the money they were being offered to re-sign was higher than the rumored numbers that leaked out. People said, oh, the WWE wants to re-sign the Revival $500,000 each. I think at one point it was $750,000 each for like 5 years. And they didn't give an exact dollar amount, but they said that the money they were being offered was higher than the $750,000 figure that was, spreading around. Think about that. Think about that and the situation that this company was in where they just fired a whole bunch of people. All due respect to the Revival, this is what happens when you start throwing around $1 million contracts for tag teams that you're not even putting on TV. You're going to dress these guys up as clowns. Basically, literal clowns, minus the red nose and the green hair, on television, in a division that you're not even showcasing, that you don't even seem to give a crap about, and you're going to pay these guys almost $1 million or $1 million each for 5 years just to keep them from going somewhere else? No wonder this company had to get rid of a whole bunch of people and had to free up some money. How many other contracts did they offer like this? To people that they didn't even have plans for. And I thought it was crazy when I would hear the stories in the Death of WCW book. You read all these stories about guys that WCW would sign to contracts. Lanny Poffo. Hey, God bless the guy. He got I think a $250,000 a year contract or something like that. 6 figures from WCW. I don't believe he was used once. I don't think they flew him out to a single show. And I thought that was a lot of money. Imagine getting paid $800,000, $900,000, $1 million a year, and having to dress up like Doink the Ninja Turtle to go on TV and do a few comedy segments, and then probably sit in catering and watch the shows on television for the next 6 months. In a way, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that they turned down. So Dawson said he doesn't know if Vince McMahon actually thought that it was a good idea, or if it was just a way to embarrass them on the way out. It could have been either one. Dawson said that Vince McMahon was the greatest worker of them all. You can't read the guy. You don't know what's going through his head. Is he being serious, or is he trying to bury you? You don't know. He could be trying to bury you to your face, and you walk out of the room thinking, man, this guy's got big plans for me. Heard stories over the years, right, of guys walking into Vince McMahon's office. I'm going to confront Vince, about whatever their gripe might be. And they wait outside of his office and they're all full of piss and vinegar, and they get in there. And by the time they walk out of the meeting, they realize, shit, he got me. I walked in, I was so angry and pissed off. Now I'm walking out, and I feel good about things, and yet I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't accomplish what I set out to do. Vince McMahon is the greatest worker of them all. So the idea, this notion that they would be wearing them in storyline out of spite. I guess that's the idea. So in storyline, these guys would talk about, we're old school, we're all about old school tag team wrestling, no flips, just fists, all that kind of stuff. I guess the idea is that they'd be wearing them out of spite. Like, okay, you people think that we're clowns? Doing comedy, then, is the only way for us to get TV time in this division? You don't think we're charismatic? You don't think we have personality? You want comedy? You want clowns? And it would be them basically, taking the piss out of how they perceive wrestling to be disrespected. And kind of throwing it back in people's faces. Wheeler said that the idea was not a terrible one. He was okay with doing it, but he just could not get over the look. Maybe if the costumes were designed a little bit differently, they could have stomached it more, but he could not look at those images without thinking, what self-respecting human being would do this? Would come out and dress up this way? It's not always about the money. Wilder says he understood that it might be different for Scott Dawson because he's got a kid. But he himself, he said, look, I live a very modest lifestyle. I don't have a big fancy house with a big fat mortgage. I basically have no debts, he said. I have no children. I don't need to make $1 million a year to be happy. That's why I think he maybe let it slip with that little comment that they actually got an offer for $1 million each, per year. He's like, I don't need to have $1 million to be happy in my life. And you really do. You listen to them speak. You hear the love and passion that they have for tag team wrestling. I mean, they sound like two guys who grew up watching the Brain Busters and the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs and Demolition, and the Fantastics they mentioned, and the Midnight Express, even Edge and Christian, the Hardys, the Dudleys, all those late 90s, early 2000s tag teams, when the tag team division really had a big renaissance in a lot of ways in WWE, and they feel that tag team wrestling can shine like that once again, that people can look back on this period if they just put the effort into it. And this could be one of those periods of time where 10, 20 years from now, people look back and go, oh yeah, those tag teams from the late 80s and the early 90s and the late 90s, and then again in the early 2020s. That's what they would like to see. That's what they think could, if they just put the effort into it, they would love to be part of something like that. They don't want to just collect a paycheck. They want to contribute. They want to be part of something in a meaningful way. And Wilder was also talking about their style and how if you look, you'll find footage of him. I've never seen this footage. I've never looked, but there's footage apparently maybe when he was on the Independents of him doing things like 450s and flips and all these moves that you never saw Dash Wilder do on WWE television. And the reason he didn't do it is because he didn't want to take any of the shine away from the baby faces. When they're the heels, their job is not to go out there and wow the crowd and do all of these spectacular moves that's going to get them cheered by some people. They're very old school in that way of thinking. That's not my job. Yeah, I can make myself look real good, but I can't. That's not my job. I have to make the other guys look good. Reminds me of Undertaker when he was on the Broken Skull sessions with Steve Austin, talking about how he had to really get acclimated to that Undertaker character because he was a big guy who can do a lot of very athletic things, big high drop kicks. Obviously he would walk the ropes, but he can do a lot of moves we never saw him do. He had to teach himself, that's not my job. My job is not to go out there and show people how athletic I am. I'm an undead zombie, for God's sakes. What he would do is he would move very slow and methodical and no sell and choke and choke and choke again. But then he'd bust out one of those high clotheslines and people would go, wow, I didn't think he had that in him. Or like years later, he started doing the dives out over the top rope in the late 90s. Well into all of those classic WrestleMania matches until he couldn't do it anymore. So the day they got their release, Dawson got a text message from Bret Hart, who is their idol. My man. And Bret asked Dawson to go ahead and share it with Wilder. He told Dawson, he said how proud he was of them and how proud he was that they stood up for themselves and what they believed in, because it would have been very easy to just shut up and take the money. I like how Bret follows things, He still follows things. Maybe he doesn't watch the television every week, but I think Bret's got his guys that he keeps an eye on in the company. The Revival. I think Bret's actually pretty friendly with the Singh brothers. So, yeah, he follows along, and that's very cool. I mean, if that were me, I got that text message, I'd fall to the floor. So that had to be a good feeling for them. There's a lot of teams they said that they would love to have the chance to work with, in Impact, AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan. They singled out the North from Impact Wrestling. That's Ethan Page. And I could never remember the guy's name, Josh Alexander. I know Ethan Page. I am not as familiar with Alexander, but they mentioned the North. They mentioned the Briscoes in ROH, FinJuice in Japan, right? David Finlay and Juice Robinson. Obviously, the Young Bucks in AEW, who were already teasing, FTR, Fear The Revolt, which is their new name. They're already teasing them on their Being the Elite series. The way they described the whole situation is they're just out of a long-term relationship and they're not looking for a rebound right away. But look, if they were signed and sealed and coming into AEW, that's exactly what they would say, right? They wouldn't tell us if they were going to just show up at Double or Nothing in a few weeks or show up on Dynamite and go ahead and attack the Young Bucks, who, by the way, we don't even know when the Young Bucks are going to be back on TV. Young Bucks and Adam Page, they're some of the stars that have made the decision that they're not going back on the road right now. So we don't even know when we're going to see these guys again. But if they did sign with AEW, they wouldn't tell us. But there's not a doubt in my mind that's where they're headed. It's just a matter of what's their start date. Not if, but when. When is their start date? With everything going on, when is their start date? That we don't know. Last thing is they mentioned their favorite match. Jericho asked people usually, hey, what's your favorite match? Their favorite match was there was a 2 out of 3 falls match at a live event with Chad Gable and Jason Jordan. Televised for Dawson, he said it would probably be their 2 out of 3 falls match at the TakeOver Toronto show against DIY, which was an incredible match. If you've never seen it, absolutely worth going out of your way to see. That right there, I can see what these guys are saying when they talk about tag team wrestling. You hear about their passion. You go back and watch that match in front of that audience. I mean, it's a Canadian crowd. Canadian crowds are notoriously awesome. But that was an amazing match. Wilder didn't pick that. He said that one's up there, but for him, it probably wouldn't be his favorite. But anyway, that was it. I mean, again, nothing overly controversial. I thought some interesting stories about their interactions with Vince McMahon, the stupid Ninja Turtle, clown costumes, and why they would turn down so much freaking money. Just keep their mouth shut, support themselves, support their family, take the money and run. I thought they did a good job of explaining, look, it's not always about the money. And if you are absolutely, totally miserable, and you're still relatively young, and maybe you feel like you're only first now heading into your prime years, and you want to make the most of it, I think it's going to end up being the best decision they could have made. Because if they go to an AEW and they're not going to starve. I don't know that they'll be making $1 million, but I'm sure they'll be making good money there too. If they are in the thick of things and they really do overachieve, then on the back end of that contract, 3-4 years from now, their value could be 10 times higher than it is right now. Because their value, let's be honest, was not going much higher in WWE.